Before we begin, please subscribe to support our sleep channel. Imagine, for just a moment, that tomorrow morning you make a simple decision. Not a decision about moving to another city, changing careers, or climbing Mount Everest. Just one small promise to yourself. For the next month, every meal will be pizza. Breakfast, pizza. Lunch, pizza. Dinner, also pizza. To some people, that sounds less like a challenge and more like the reward for winning the lottery. After all, pizza has become one of the world's favorite comfort foods. It appears at birthday parties, movie nights, office lunches, sporting events, and those evenings when cooking somehow feels far more difficult than it should. But as tempting as this delicious thought experiment may be, it raises an interesting question. What would actually happen if pizza became your everyday meal? Would your body immediately wave a tiny white flag of surrender? Would you somehow transform into a human pepperoni? Fortunately, biology is rarely quite so dramatic. The truth is both more surprising and much more interesting. Pizza is not a single food. A homemade pizza topped with vegetables and grilled chicken shares surprisingly little with a frozen, extra cheese, double pepperoni pizza that has spent months waiting patiently inside a supermarket freezer. That means the answer to our question isn't simply good or bad. Like many things in nutrition, the reality lives comfortably somewhere in the middle. Tonight, we'll quietly follow this unusual experiment from the very first slice to the weeks and months that follow. We'll discover how your body responds, why your brain enjoys pizza so much, whether it could ever become part of a healthy lifestyle, and how this humble flatbread grew from simple beginnings into one of the world's most recognizable meals. So, settle into a comfortable position, relax your shoulders, and let your thoughts slow down. Before we can understand what happens when someone eats pizza every day, we first need to answer a surprisingly difficult question. What exactly is a pizza? At first, that sounds almost silly. Most of us could point to one from across a room without hesitation. Yet, from a nutritional point of view, pizza is less like a single food and more like an entire family of meals wearing the same name tag. Imagine walking into 4 different kitchens. In the first, someone is carefully stretching fresh dough by hand before topping it with crushed tomatoes, basil, a few slices of fresh mozzarella, and a drizzle of olive oil. In the second, a frozen pizza slides from a cardboard box into an oven. In the third, a deep dish pizza arrives, bubbling with layers of cheese and sausage. Finally, a homemade whole grain pizza is covered with colorful vegetables and grilled chicken. All 4 are pizzas, yet they may differ by hundreds of calories, dramatically different amounts of sodium, fiber, saturated fat, and protein, and even how full they leave you feeling afterward. That is why asking whether pizza is healthy is a little like asking whether a vehicle is fast. A bicycle, a family sedan, and a race car are all vehicles, but you probably wouldn't enter the Tour de France in a pickup truck. Pizza works much the same way. Most pizzas begin with a simple foundation: dough, sauce, cheese, and toppings. The dough provides carbohydrates, which become one of the body's primary energy sources. If you've ever wondered why pizza can feel so satisfying, after a long day, those carbohydrates are part of the answer. They help replenish glycogen, the stored form of energy found in your muscles and liver. Then comes the cheese. Cheese contributes protein, calcium, and fat. Protein helps support muscles and many other tissues throughout the body, while fat slows digestion and can help meals feel more satisfying. Of course, more cheese also usually means more calories and saturated fat, which is why two slices from different restaurants can look almost identical while behaving very differently on a nutrition label. Tomato sauce quietly does more work than many people realize. Tomatoes contain vitamins, minerals, and a natural antioxidant called lycopene. Although no one should think of pizza as a replacement for eating vegetables, the sauce contributes more than color alone. Finally come the toppings. This is where pizza becomes wonderfully unpredictable. Perhaps the biggest surprise is that pizza itself isn't automatically the hero or the villain of the story. The ingredients, and just as importantly, the portions, do most of the talking. It's easy to imagine pizza as a mysterious nutritional package that appears fully formed inside a delivery box, but every slice is really just a collection of familiar ingredients sharing the same crust. Thinking about pizza this way makes our experiment much more interesting. So, if pizza isn't one single food, what happens when we choose one version and eat it every single day? Does our body panic? Does it quietly adapt? Or does something much less dramatic happen instead? Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, opening the refrigerator, and discovering that last night's leftovers have become today's breakfast. Cold pizza for breakfast has a surprisingly loyal fan club, and many of its members would probably argue that it somehow tastes even better the next day. Your body, however, doesn't care whether the slice is warm or cold. It simply begins doing what it has done with every meal you've ever eaten. This often surprises people because nutrition headlines can make it sound as though eating a single slice of pizza will immediately trigger dramatic consequences. In reality, healthy human bodies are remarkably adaptable. One pizza meal rarely changes very much at all. If your pizza contains a generous amount of sodium, though, something subtle may happen over the next day or two. Your body may temporarily hold on to a little more water. The number on the bathroom scale could creep upward. This is one reason nutrition can be so confusing. We often assume every change on a scale reflects fat gain, when in reality, our bodies are constantly shifting water, food, and stored energy from one day to the next. Energy is another interesting part of the story. The crust provides carbohydrates that help refill glycogen stores, particularly if you've recently been active. If you've spent the afternoon hiking, cycling, or simply chasing energetic children around the house, your muscles will happily accept that incoming fuel. The toppings matter here as well. A pizza topped with vegetables, mushrooms, peppers, onions, or grilled chicken tells a different nutritional story than one covered almost entirely with processed meats. Neither automatically determines your health, but each nudges your daily nutrition in a different direction. Portion size quietly enters the conversation too. One or two slices may fit comfortably into many people's daily calorie needs. Half of a large pizza, followed by garlic bread, dessert, and a sugary drink, is an entirely different experience. It's rather unfair that pizza is often blamed for everything happening elsewhere on the dinner table. Perhaps the most important lesson from our first few days is that nothing extraordinary happens. You don't suddenly become healthier because pizza contains tomatoes, nor do you instantly become unhealthy because it contains cheese. Human nutrition is rarely that simple. Instead, your body continues making thousands of tiny adjustments every hour, balancing energy, storing nutrients, regulating hormones, and quietly adapting to the choices you make. That's what it has evolved to do. And that brings us to a much more interesting question. If the first few days are surprisingly ordinary, what happens when those days become weeks? What changes begin so slowly that you might not even notice them at first? By now, our imaginary pizza experiment has reached its first full week, 7 days, 21 meals, if pizza has truly become breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Surprisingly, many people would still feel fairly normal. This is where expectations and biology often part ways. The human body is incredibly resilient. It doesn't judge foods by reputation. It simply responds to the nutrients that arrive each day. If enough calories, protein, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals are available, many of its systems continue working quietly behind the scenes. That doesn't mean nothing has changed. Some of the earliest changes are simply too subtle to notice without paying close attention. Energy levels may also surprise you. Because pizza contains carbohydrates, it provides fuel that your muscles can readily use. Someone who remains physically active might continue feeling energetic throughout the week, especially if portions remain reasonable. Of course, not every slice is identical. A vegetable-rich homemade pizza generally supplies more fiber than many frozen or heavily processed varieties. Fiber quietly performs one of nutrition's least glamorous but most valuable jobs, helping support healthy digestion while feeding beneficial bacteria that live inside the gut. Your digestive system is home to trillions of microorganisms, collectively known as the gut microbiome. They don't simply exist as passengers. They help break down components of food, produce useful compounds, and interact with many aspects of human health. Although 1 week is far too short to completely reshape this microscopic community. Consistently eating meals that are low in fiber gives those helpful bacteria less of the food they prefer. Over months, that may become more meaningful. Another interesting question appears near the end of the first week. Are you still excited about pizza? Or has the novelty begun wearing off just a little? Even our favorite foods become familiar when they appear often enough. That gentle shift in excitement turns out to be less about your stomach and much more about your brain. In the next part, we'll discover why even the world's favorite comfort food can slowly lose some of its magic. By the end of the first week, something interesting begins happening, not necessarily inside your stomach, but inside your mind. The first slice of pizza often feels exciting. By the 21st slice, not so much. This is one reason many cultures developed cuisines with remarkable variety. Choosing different foods over the course of a week naturally increases the chances of obtaining vitamins, minerals, and fiber from many different sources. A single food, even one as adaptable as pizza, simply cannot provide everything in ideal amounts forever. None of this means our pizza experiment has failed. In fact, it has revealed something surprisingly reassuring. During the first week, your body does not dramatically collapse, and your health is not determined by one ingredient or one meal. Instead, dozens of small factors quietly add together over time. Calories ingredients, portion sizes, physical activity, sleep, hydration, and overall dietary balance all contribute tiny pieces to a much larger picture. Nutrition is less like flipping a light switch and more like tending a garden. Small choices repeated consistently eventually shape the final result. So, if the first week ends with relatively few dramatic changes, where do the real differences begin to appear? The answer lies in the months ahead, when today's tiny decisions slowly accumulate into tomorrow's habits. 3 months have now passed since our imaginary pizza experiment began. At this point, the novelty has faded. Ordering pizza no longer feels like a celebration. It's simply Tuesday, then Wednesday, then Thursday. Friends begin asking the same question. Are you really still eating pizza every day? It's a fair question, but perhaps a more interesting one is quietly waiting in the background. Has our pizza lover actually gained weight? Many people would confidently answer yes. Pizza has earned a reputation for being the food most likely to expand your waistline. But nutrition has a habit of being more complicated and much more interesting than our assumptions. Our bodies are constantly performing a balancing act. Every day, we take in energy from food, and every day, we use energy to stay alive, move, think, breathe, digest food, and keep our hearts beating. Over weeks and months, body weight is influenced largely by the relationship between those two sides of the equation. This means something surprising. A person does not automatically gain weight simply because they eat pizza. If their total calorie intake matches the amount of energy their body uses over time, significant weight gain is not inevitable. On the other hand, consistently eating more calories than the body needs, whether those calories come from pizza, oversized smoothies, handfuls of nuts, or even foods with an exceptionally healthy reputation, can gradually lead to weight gain. This surprises many people because we often divide foods into simple categories of good and bad. Real nutrition is rarely so tidy. Portion sizes, activity levels, sleep, stress, and long-term habits all quietly influence the outcome. That doesn't mean pizza gets a free pass. Pizza is often energy dense, easy to eat quickly, and incredibly enjoyable. Those three characteristics can make it surprisingly easy to eat, more than we intended, before our brain has time to announce that we're comfortably full. Perhaps you've experienced this yourself. The first slice disappears quickly. The second follows without much thought. Then someone casually asks if anybody wants the last slice. Suddenly, your stomach and your curiosity begin negotiating with each other. If our experiment ended with the number on the bathroom scale, the story would be far too simple. Health is much larger than body weight. A person can maintain a steady weight while still falling short on important nutrients, just as someone can carry extra weight while still making many healthy choices. Imagine two pizzas sitting side by side. One is topped with spinach, mushrooms, peppers, onions, tomatoes, grilled chicken, and a modest amount of mozzarella on a whole grain crust. The other is loaded with processed meats, extra cheese, and a thick, refined crust. If both contain the same number of calories, they may influence body weight similarly over time, but they don't provide the same nutritional experience. One of the biggest differences is fiber. Fiber rarely receives the attention given to protein or carbohydrates. Yet, it quietly supports digestion, helps people feel satisfied after meals, and provides food for many of the beneficial bacteria living inside the gut. If pizza becomes your primary meal and vegetables are pushed aside day after day, fiber intake may slowly decline. Nothing dramatic happens overnight. There is no warning siren or flashing light. Instead, the effects accumulate gradually, much like dust settling on a bookshelf, one tiny layer at a time. Then there is saturated fat. Cheese is not the nutritional villain it was once portrayed to be, but eating large amounts of cheese and processed meats every day may increase saturated fat intake beyond recommended levels for some individuals. Once again, the key word is consistency. One pizza night with friends is very different from repeating the same pattern hundreds of times. By now, our imaginary pizza enthusiast has been living with the same meal for months. Surprisingly, the biggest mystery is no longer what is happening inside the stomach. It is what is happening inside the brain. Have you ever noticed how simply smelling pizza can make you hungry, even if dinner was only an hour ago? The aroma drifts through the air. Someone opens the box, and suddenly, your carefully planned evening snack becomes considerably less planned. This isn't because your brain lacks self-control. Human beings evolved in environments where calorie-rich foods were often difficult to find. When our ancestors stumbled across energy-dense foods, enjoying them was an advantage rather than a weakness. Pizza happens to combine several characteristics our brains naturally find rewarding. A warm crust provides carbohydrates. Cheese contributes fat and protein. Tomato sauce adds acidity and sweetness, while herbs and seasonings create a complex aroma. Together, they produce an experience that is greater than the sum of its ingredients. Scientists often describe foods like these as highly palatable. That doesn't mean they are magically addictive. It simply means many people find them exceptionally enjoyable because multiple senses are being stimulated at the same time. The first bite is rarely just about taste. You hear the gentle crunch of the crust. You feel the warmth. You smell herbs, baked bread, and melted cheese before the food even reaches your mouth. Your brain quietly combines all of those signals into a single experience. That experience also becomes connected to memory. Birthday parties, Friday movie nights, watching the big game with friends, celebrating the end of exams. Pizza often arrives during happy moments. So over time, our brains begin linking the food with comfort, relaxation, and companionship. Imagine receiving the exact same slice of pizza in two different situations. In one, you're sharing it with close friends after a long hike. In the other, you're rushing through lunch while answering emails. The pizza hasn't changed, but your experience of it almost certainly has. This is one reason comfort foods are so fascinating. They comfort us not only because of their ingredients, but because of the memories and routines attached to them. Of course, even comfort has its limits. By the 100th consecutive day of pizza, something unexpected begins happening. The excitement starts fading. The slice is still enjoyable, but it no longer feels special. Our brains are experts at adapting. Novel experiences capture attention, while repeated experiences slowly become ordinary. It's one of the reasons a brand new car eventually feels like just another way to get to work, and why your favorite song eventually becomes part of the background. Pizza is no exception. In the next part, we'll discover why familiarity changes the way we experience food, and why variety may be just as satisfying as the meal itself. By month 6, our imaginary volunteer has reached an unexpected milestone. Pizza is no longer exciting simply because it is pizza. It has become familiar. That may sound disappointing, but it reveals something remarkable about the human brain. Our minds are constantly searching for change. New experiences demand attention because they might contain important information. Familiar experiences, on the other hand, slowly fade into the background. Psychologists often describe this process as habituation. In everyday language, it's simply getting used to something. Our pizza experiment has answered a surprising number of questions. We've discovered that pizza isn't automatically unhealthy in small amounts, that calories matter more than reputation when it comes to weight, and that our brains gradually adapt even to our favorite meals. But one question still lingers, like the smell of fresh dough from a nearby bakery. How did pizza become one of the world's favorite foods? The answer begins long before anyone had heard of pepperoni, mozzarella, or pizza delivery. In fact, it begins before tomatoes were even growing in Europe. Thousands of years ago, people throughout the Mediterranean were baking simple flatbreads. Ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans all prepared breads that could be topped with herbs, oils, garlic, and other locally available ingredients. They weren't pizzas in the modern sense, but they shared an important idea. A simple piece of bread could become an entire meal. It's funny to imagine history taking a slightly different turn. Had tomatoes failed to win people over, today's pizza might look completely different. Entire debates about extra sauce, stuffed crust, or pineapple might never have happened. The internet would certainly have one fewer argument to enjoy. One of the most famous stories in pizza history takes us to the late 19th century. According to tradition, a pizza made with tomatoes, fresh mozzarella, and basil was prepared to honor Queen Margherita of Italy. The three colors conveniently mirrored the Italian flag, and whether every detail of the story is perfectly accurate or not, the name Pizza Margherita has endured for generations. From Naples, pizza slowly traveled with Italian immigrants who carried their recipes across oceans. They settled in cities throughout North America, opening bakeries and small restaurants that introduced their neighbors to a food that was inexpensive, filling, and wonderfully shareable. The 20th century accelerated everything. Home ovens improved. Frozen pizzas appeared in supermarkets. Delivery services made it possible to enjoy a hot meal without leaving the couch. Eventually, ordering pizza became almost effortless. For many families, it became less of a special occasion and more of a familiar weekly tradition. So, what would happen if you ate pizza every day? The answer is neither wonderfully simple nor terribly frightening. Your body would adapt. Your brain would adapt. Your taste buds would adapt. Some habits would help you, while others might slowly work against you. Although it is unhealthy to consume nothing but pizza, it is far more on balance than on pizza itself. And perhaps that's a comforting thought. Tomorrow's meal doesn't have to be perfect. It simply has to be one small part of a much bigger picture. Now, as our journey comes to an end, you can leave the question behind, close the pizza box in your imagination, and let your thoughts drift somewhere quieter. Thank you for spending part of your evening with me. Until next time, good night.